Welcome back to Proxam, everybody. And today we're going to be talking about something that was recently revealed about the new Chaos Demons Codex, and that is the Daemonic Save. And we're going to be looking at what impact it's going to have on our faction specifically. We are a faction with a lot of high AP weapons and a few ways to ignore invul saves. So this is going to actually hit us a little bit hard in certain ways, but I do think we also have a lot of ways to deal with it. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. There were another couple of leaks that were made about the new Chaos Demons Codex that I won't go into in this video, but we'll probably cover it in a later video. And I've decided to take particular attention to the Chaos Demons Codex because in the past, Craftworld Eldar that is, has had a very bad matchup against certain demon armies. And I actually think that for newer players and, more experienced players as well, that the new Chaos Demon Codex is going to possibly be a huge problem for us. So I'm going to go into why I think that, and I'm also going to talk about this new Demonic Save and how we can get around it and how we can still be effective, at killing demons even though it's in effect. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be doing in this video. We're going to be looking at what the Chaos Demon Demonic Save is. We're going to be defining that and looking at that. That has already been revealed and confirmed. We're going to be looking at which Craftworld units will be affected the most by it. We're going to be looking at what is unaffected by the Demonic Save. And lastly, we're going to be looking at units that are going to be the most effective against demons with that Demonic Save. So what is the Chaos Demon Demonic Save? Well, it's essentially an armor save with two different values, one for shooting and one for close combat. So on the left here, you see the one for close combat is on the left, the one for shooting is on the right. And these saves cannot be modified in any way by armor penetration. So they cannot be modified by AP whatsoever. So if you have an AP 1 or 2 weapon, or even an AP -5 weapon like the Fire Prism, it does not matter. It's going to be, they're going to basically be able to make that save no matter what. However, in addition, these are also not counted as invulnerable saves, and therefore cannot be affected by abilities that ignore invul saves. So the Linked Fire stratagem for the Fire Prisms cannot affect this save whatsoever. And obviously, not just Craftworld Eldar are going to be affected by this. There's a lot of factions out there that have ignores invul abilities that will also not be able to use their special rules against this save. And typically, what I've seen so far from the leaks is that ranged demon units will have a better save against shooting, and melee demon units will have a better save in close combat. So essentially, to be able to take these out the most effectively, the strategy is going to be to shoot against melee units and get into combat with their shooting units. And that's basically how we're going to be able to kill them the quickest. For example, the example of the Demonic Save on the left you see there, where it has a 6+ and then the 3+, that's actually from a unit of Pink Horrors, I believe. So Pink Horrors are a demonic shooting unit, so they have a terrible save in close combat, and that's where you're going to want to get them. You're going to want to engage them in close combat with something. And I'll tell you kind of what units are going to be effective against them in close combat. So I think obviously this Demonic Save looks pretty scary, right? And the reason why is because none of our AP weapons are going to work. A lot of our highest damage weapons are high damage because they have a good AP value. For example, Shuriken Catapults, right? AP -1 with the Shuriken ability, which gives it an additional -2 AP. Dire Avengers have -4 AP when they proc a Shuriken. Well, when they proc the Shuriken special rule, right? So this is going to be a lot of AP that we're missing out on, and this is an army-wide ability that they have. It's not just a couple units. It's not just Tzeentch units or Slaanesh or whatever. It's every single demon in that army has this ability. And I think that honestly, this means that across the board, weapons with a low AP value but more attacks are going to be more effective in general. And we'll also go into why that is. But this is going to be a big problem for Eldar because, again, a lot of our units have high AP values and are very specialized at killing armor. And we're not going to be able to have these abilities against demons. So that's going to be a little bit challenging. And just to reiterate, the Craftworld units that will be most affected by this change, the demonic save, are the Fire Prism, mainly, and high AP value units. So this is pretty much any unit with a high AP value. So things like Howling Banshees and stuff like that are also going to be affected by this very greatly. Now, I think the unit that gets the most affected by this actually is the Fire Prism. And it's kind of sad because I feel like the Fire Prism was finally in a great place as far as being able to just dish out heavy damage against any target, no matter what. But against demons, this is basically demons are going to hard counter the Fire Prism. So the Fire Prism relies on linked fire to punch through a lot of the toughest targets in the game, especially those with invul saves like NIDs. And we pay a high premium for Fire Prisms. They're very expensive models, and you have to invest a lot in them. Against demons, you're not going to be able to use that linked fire ability as well because, demons are going to get their save anyway. So Fire Prisms also just don't have the volume of fire to punch through most demonic monsters after the changes to the demonic save. So it's no longer an invul save, which means that most demonic monsters are going to get some sort of save against it. And this save is probably, for most monsters, going to at least be a 4+. So that's essentially a 4+ invul save, without being an invul save, right? Against the shooting attacks from the Fire Prism. So I think the Fire Prism's effectiveness is going to be severely affected by this. And I think that over-investing in Fire Prisms might actually be a liability in certain matchups against demons. The other units that are going to be highly affected by this are the high AP value units like Howling Banshees, Shining Spears, Wraith Blades, etc. The high AP of their weapons is going to be basically useless against a demonic save. And in fact, units with high AP usually have less attacks than units with lower AP, right? For example, Howling Banshees typically have a lower amount of attacks than Striking Scorpions do. And this means that if you have a unit like this going against a demonic unit, you are potentially going to get some really bad trades if you're not careful about what you charge. Now, for example, if you charge some Howling Banshees into some Pink Horrors, you should be fine because Pink Horrors, their demonic save in close combat is absolutely awful. It's a 6+. So essentially, you're going to be doing the same thing as you would against a highly armored target that didn't have that demonic save. But again, the problem here is that you're still going to get a save against it. And are Howling Banshees really the best unit to be throwing against something like Pink Horrors? Probably not. And I think what this means is that a lot of our best combat units are now going to be completely ineffective against a large amount of demonic armies. And depending on the stats, and I don't know any of the point costs yet for the new Demon Codex, but I'm telling you, I have a sinking feeling that there's going to be some chariot spam. I just have a sinking feeling of that. I've seen some of the chariot stats, and they're pretty impressive. They're very fast. They do a lot of damage. So I'm thinking that's going to be the way to go for a lot of demonic armies. And we don't have a lot of AP to deal with them, essentially. So that's not going to be great. So Howling Banshees, Shining Spears, and Wraith Blades, I think, are going to basically be a couple of units that get hit the most by this because they have high AP values and comparatively, they don't have a lot of attacks. Shining Spears don't have a ton of attacks, neither do Wraith Blades with Force Axes, although the Ghost Swords do have a lot of attacks. But even so, if they're going against combat-oriented demon units, they're just not going to trade well regardless. However, there are going to be some things which are still going to be unaffected by the demonic save, and those things are mortal wounds, because the mortal wounds rule states that it ignores all saves And guess what? A demonic save is, at the end of the day, a save. So mortal wounds will still ignore that to the best of my knowledge, unless another rule comes out or something like that that's hidden in the Demon Codex. Mortal wounds will ignore the demonic save, which also makes sense from a fluff perspective. And another thing that is going to be unaffected is the high volume of attacks and firepower with low AP that a lot of our units possess. Things like scatter lasers, striking scorpions, stuff like that. So again, with mortal wounds, as per the current rules, mortal wounds ignore all saves. And this includes the demonic save. The demonic save is still a save. So mortal wounds still should ignore them. However, this does not mean, again, like I said, that certain units won't have some sort of other defense against mortal wounds. I know that Nurgle, for example, currently has a feel no pain type save against mortal wounds, and pretty much all wounds that manage to get through their invulnerable save. So Nurgle units and maybe some other units, maybe some characters or something like that, are going to have this ability still. I guarantee you. I guarantee at least Nurgle will have this. And this is going to be, again, this is going to be another hurdle for us to go over, because Nurgle units are going to be immune to a lot more than they used to be. They're tough, and they're going to have some sort of defense against mortal wounds. Not saying that we can't kill Nurgle units, but the demonic save is definitely going to help them be more survivable against a lot of different targets. The other thing that's going to be pretty much unaffected by this demonic save is units with a high volume of attacks or firepower with low AP. So essentially, value-wise, the demonic save doesn't do any better against low AP weapons than high AP weapons. And a lot of low AP weapons have more attacks and hit a lot harder against light targets. So for example, demon units are usually taken in large squads of at least 10 or over, right? So as a result, they're a lot more susceptible to anti-horde tech, which means blast weapons, high number of shots, things like swooping hawks, warp spiders, shadow weavers, etc. Anything that is an anti-horde weapon is going to be a lot more effective. And the great thing is that their demonic save really doesn't do a lot for them, because these weapons have a low AP value anyway. So when we start talking about what units are going to be the most effective against demons, it's going to obviously be the units with a high number or high volume of attacks with the potential to do mortal wound damage. So things like striking scorpions, swooping hawks, warp spiders, shroud runners, D-cannon support weapons are still very good. And as a special mention, I put in Wraithguard with D-sights, although I put 2 asterisks above them because they're kind of like one of those units that can be good in certain circumstances against certain demon armies, but I don't think they're going to be good against all demonic armies, especially those that are heavily invested in close combat, because they're just very easily trapped in close combat and can't really get out easily. So striking scorpions are really good against the new demons, as far as I can tell, because A, they have a large amount of attacks with a high strength. They can easily hit and wound pretty much all demonic infantry units, and they deal mortal wounds on top of their normal damage. Especially when buffed, a unit of striking scorpions, even a small squad of 5, can rip through a lot more than their points worth of demons. So I do think striking scorpions are still going to be a powerful option, a powerful tool against demons, and I think they're probably going to be the best close combat unit against demonic forces. Swooping hawks are also going to be very effective against demonic armies because they have a large volume of fire with very low AP value. I actually think they have AP 0. And they can retreat back to safety after shooting. So they can shoot a demon unit up and then retreat back to safety so that demon unit cannot counterattack. So swooping hawks are still going to be a very effective unit against demonic forces. Now, I think the actual true MVPs in this matchup are going to be hands down warp spiders. And the reason I think this is because their weapons have the blast keyword. So not only do they have a lot of attacks, but blast weapons are extra effective against large units, 10 or over specifically. And sometimes with demon units, you're going to see a lot of squads of 20. And the reason why this is because in the past, demons have benefited from a couple of special rules when they are over 20 models. So it's actually incentivized. Well, it has been in the past. I don't know if it's going to be in this codex, but it has been incentivized in the past to take large units. So blast weapons are going to be extra effective against these types of units. In addition, warp spiders can easily avoid close combat and create distance between them and enemy units. So they have the flicker jump ability basically, which allows them to move 6 inches when somebody declares a charge on them. And this can easily foil a lot of, demonic charges, right? Especially out of Deep Strike. Another thing that we're going to have to watch out for is, according to the rumors, which are, in my opinion, they're pretty likely because a lot of the rumors so far have been true. Playtesters have leaked a couple of things. Basically, some demonic units are going to be able to deep strike within 9 inches. Instead of within 9, it's going to be within 6, or have to be outside of 6 inches of enemy units. And that's going to mean that they're going to be able to charge you out of deep strike. So warp spiders could actually make a really good screening unit in these circumstances, because when the demons come in, warp spiders can easily just fall back and they'll basically auto-fail their charge at that point. So warp spiders not only can easily avoid assault and create distance, but they can do extreme damage to demonic units. And also they have some really good Exarch powers. Web of Deceit and Spider's Lair are both going to be very good at misdirecting and getting away from potentially very dangerous situations. Shroud Runners are another great unit against demons because they have a high volume of fire, are very fast, can reposition very easily to get out of assault range and things like that. And they can also slow enemy units down with the wire weave grenade stratagem. Again, this is going to be gold against an army that is primarily geared towards close combat, and Shroud Runners seem to have all of the above. High volume of fire, very fast, and can also slow enemy units down in combat. And of course, we have the D-Cannon support weapons. So these are really going to be a godsend against things like chariots and stuff like that. Big monsters, because they are heavy damage, has mortal wound potential that can get around the demonic save. And they just have more firepower in general against things like monsters than fire prisms do in the current state of the game. So, fire prisms aren't going to really do a lot against demonic units now that they have the demonic save, but D-cannons have so many shots, right? Basically, a D-cannon battery triples the amount of shots that a fire prism can produce for the same cost, around the same cost, and can also do mortal wound damage on top of that. So D-cannons are going to be very effective, and because of the nature of demons wanting to get close to you, wanting to get into combat with you, you're going to be able to get the targets that you want to hit much easier because of the lack of range of the D-cannon. Remember, the D-cannon has 24-inch range, so the fact of the matter is that because demon armies are going to be wanting to get close to you anyway, it won't be as much of a big deal. And D-cannons can attack out of line of sight, so a lot of the ranged units of the demons are going to be unaffected. Ineffective against the D-cannon support weapons. And lastly, I put Wraithguard with D-sights in there, not because they're a fantastic unit in general, but because they happen to be good against demons. And the reason why is because they have a large volume of blast firepower, they have a high strength weapon with tons of mortal wound damage. Here's the thing though, even though they have, it almost seems like the perfect weapon against demonic units, they're really expensive, and they're probably still not the best unit due to their high cost, and also the fact that they cannot shoot in combat, and they have no good way of escaping combat. They only have a 12-inch range. So For the cost of a unit of D sites, you could have 2 units of warp spiders. Warp spiders can get out of combat situations, and Wraithguard cannot. And because they have the blast keyword, they cannot shoot in combat, so once they are stuck in combat with something, they're probably going to be there until they die, or you pay command points to fall back. And both options are not great, and that's why I kind of had the asterisks besides the Wraithguard with D sites, because, well, Wraithguard are good in this situation as far as firepower goes, but damage-wise, I still think they lose out to warp spiders for their cost, and they get stuck in combat way easier. So, again, a good unit, but not probably something that's going to be that effective in the long run of a game. So, in conclusion, I think the new demonic save looks really scary, and in fact, when I saw it for the first time, I was a little scared. I was like, wow, okay, we don't get any AP value against these guys. We have no way to take them out, essentially. But when I thought about it a little more, thankfully, Craftworld Eldar have a lot of tools to deal with them that a lot of our lists incorporate anyways. A lot of my lists have Swooping Hawks and Warp Spiders in them, and even my Uthway list has D-cannons and other tools to deal with these types of units. So, in essence, I think the only things that are really going to be severely affected by this are Fire Prisms, because again, Fire Prisms are going to essentially be totally negated because their high AP values and ignores invulnerability are going to be completely ignored. So Fire Prisms are going to be very ineffective against demons. And units with a low number of high AP attacks, things like Shining Spears and Howling Banshees, are also going to be less effective against demons, although probably still more effective than Fire Prisms. So what we really have to do against demons is be very careful about targeting the right units at all stages of the game in order to be successful. And I think newer players might have trouble with this, but here's a couple of takeaways from this, if anything. And just a couple of things to keep in mind. One, typically in the new Demon Codex, their shooting units are going to be extra weak in close combat, and their combat units are going to be extra weak against shooting. So use that to your advantage. Shoot at combat units and assault shooting units. And typically you would want to do this anyway under the best circumstances, but let's be honest, sometimes that's not always possible. However, as Craftworld Eldar, we should be having a pretty balanced list with both combat and shooting units, and we're going to have to use these units to the best of their possible abilities and what they're strongest against. So my advice to you is, if you do have a couple of units that don't perform well against demons, then at least try to match those units up with the opposite unit of their army. So for example, if you have a close combat unit like Howling Banshees, they're not going to be effective in combat against things like Bloodletters or Plague Bearers, right? So either the Nurgle or Khorne units, don't charge Howling Banshees into those units. Charge them into the Tzeentch units that shoot. So for example, Pink Horrors, Blue Horrors, stuff like that. Charge them into those units because they're going to do a lot more damage and make up their points a little bit better than if they would charge into something like Bloodletters or, again, Plague Bearers. So you're really going to have to think about those things before you make decisions about what you're going to do with your units in the game. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. I am going to follow up on this as more rumors come out and stuff like that, because again, I think demons have typically been a harder matchup for Eldar in the past, and I definitely want to stay on top of that for you guys. So also let me know if you have any questions in the comment section about anything, or you guys want to give some advice to some newer players, or you generally just have something on your mind that you want to talk about. Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. I always love reading your guys' comments and, again, commenting back and interacting with you guys. So just let me know. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. I'll see you guys next time, and have a good one. Peace out, everybody. See you later.